Media fact-checker. Death of relationship expert Mel Schilling from colon cancer at age 54. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Mel Schilling died on Tuesday, February 2026, aged 54 from colon cancer that had spread to her brain. Schilling was diagnosed with colon cancer in December 2023, with a 5-centimeter tumor removed via surgery. In February 2024, routine scans revealed small nodules in her lungs indicating metastasis. She underwent 16 rounds of chemotherapy over 2 years before announcing her departure from MAFS Australia in February 2026 due to health challenges. Schilling joined the Australian version of Married at First Sight in 2016 and the UK version in 2021. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian mentions Schilling was eligible for a clinical trial starting March 2026, but no other source confirms this detail. ABC and Guardian describe Schilling's husband Gareth Brisbane as a development leader at Mercer Australia with a PhD, but this is not mentioned in other sources. The Guardian states Schilling was peacefully surrounded by love in her final moments, while other sources focus on her final message to her family. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia's fuel supply crisis due to lowered diesel standards and shortages amid geopolitical tensions. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Australia temporarily lowered diesel standards, flashpoint from 61.5 degrees Celsius to 60.5 degrees Celsius, for 6 months to increase supply, allowing imports from the US, Canada, and Europe, Guardian, ABC. As of early April, 6 fuel shipments to Australia have been cancelled, with more expected, Guardian, ABC. In New South Wales, 164 service stations are without diesel, and 289 lack at least one fuel type, Guardian, ABC. In Queensland, 55 stations lack diesel and 35 lack regular unleaded petrol, Guardian, ABC. Energy Minister Chris Bowen announced the diesel standard adjustment and confirmed shortages in Victoria, 162 stations missing fuel, South Australia, 46, and Western Australia, 6, Guardian, ABC. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian reports 105 NSW stations lack diesel, Min's claim, but ABC and Guardian both confirm 164 NSW stations lack diesel, Bowen's data. The Guardian states Bowen declined to share shortages for WA, NT, SA, and Tasmania, while ABC lists shortages in WA, 6, SA, 46, and Tasmania, 1 diesel, 6 unleaded. The Guardian says 6 shipments were cancelled as early as April, while ABC states 6 deliveries were cancelled for April with some replaced by alternate sources. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Trump orders ICE agents to US airports during DHS funding shutdown over security staff shortages. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Donald Trump threatened to deploy ICE agents to US airports on Monday, March 24, 2026, if Democrats did not agree to fund DHS, mentioned in ABC, Guardian sources 3-4-5. The partial government shutdown began on February 14, 2026, and is in its 36th day as of March 2026, ABC, Guardian sources 3-4-5. More than 400 TSA workers have quit since the shutdown began, ABC, Guardian sources 3-4. TSA officers are missing paychecks, with some set to miss their second full paycheck on March 27, 2026, ABC, Guardian sources 4-5. ICE agents are not specifically trained for airport security, which is TSA's domain, ABC, Guardian sources 3-4-5. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states that ICE agents are not trained for airport security, and one Democrat called the proposal a reckless threat to misuse ICE agents, Article 1, While Guardian sources 3 and 4 describe Trump's claim that ICE agents would do security like no one has ever seen before without specifying training limitations. ABC mentions that Stuart Baker, former DHS official, said using ICE agents would be better than having nobody, Article 1, while Guardian sources 3 and 4 emphasize the lack of finalized plans and potential inefficiencies in deployment. ABC reports that 400 TSA workers have quit, Article 1, while Guardian sources 3 and 4 state that at least 366 TSA agents have quit, Article 4. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Teen stabs woman in Melbourne shopping centre, police arrest suspect on bail. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A 25-year-old woman was stabbed while walking to work at M-City Shopping Centre on Blackburn Road, Clayton, around 7:30 to 7:50 a.m. on Thursday. A 16-year-old boy was arrested and charged with intentionally causing injury, recklessly causing injury, assaulting someone with a weapon, and possessing a controlled weapon. The victim was taken to the Alfred Hospital with upper body injuries and remained in a serious but stable condition. A passerby called 000-000 after the stabbing and police arrested the suspect soon after at a local medical centre in Clayton. The suspect was remanded in custody to appear in a children's court. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC says the victim was stabbed inside the shopping centre, but Theej says she was stabbed while walking through it. ABC does not mention the suspect being on bail, but Theej states the suspect was on bail before the attack. Theej reports the suspect was charged with theft and committing an indictable offence while on bail, which ABC does not mention. This story was covered by ABC News and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. ICE detains Canadian mother and autistic daughter in Texas immigration facilities. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Tanya Warner, 47, and her 7-year-old autistic daughter Ayla Lucas are Canadian citizens detained by ICE in Texas since March 14, 2025. The family was stopped at a Border Patrol checkpoint in Sarita, Texas, on March 14 while driving home from a baby shower in Raymondville. Tanya Warner holds a Texas driver's license, work visa, and a functional visa valid until 2030, according to Edward Warner and Amber Sinclair. The pair were initially held at the Rio Grande Valley Central Processing Center in McAllen, Texas, before being transferred to the Dilley Processing Center in South Texas. Global Affairs Canada acknowledges multiple cases of Canadians detained in U.S. immigration facilities and advocates for their rights but cannot exempt them from local legal processes. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states the family was detained at Rio Grande Valley Central Processing Center in McAllen as of the initial report, while Article 2 clarifies they were moved to Dilley early on Friday. Article 1 does not mention handcuffing children at Rio Grande Valley, whereas Article 2 states Tanya Warner and Ayla were handcuffed during their initial detention there. Article 1 does not quote Tanya Warner warning immigrants to lie low or criticize Trump's administration directly, while Article 2 includes her explicit statement. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Women's Asian Cup 2026 final between Australia's Matildas and Japan in Sydney. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Women's Asian Cup final was played on March 21, 2026, at Stadium Australia in Sydney at 8 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time. Japan won the final 1-0 against Australia, securing their third Women's Asian Cup title. Maika Hameno scored the winning goal for Japan in the 15th minute of the first half. The match drew a record crowd of approximately 74,397 fans at Stadium Australia. Australia's Sam Kerr was captain of the Matildas team and wore a compression bandage on her right knee during the match. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC mentioned the Matildas semi-final crowd was just 35,170, while The Guardian described it as a significant increase from past tournaments without specifying the exact number. ABC highlighted the blue circle of death joke as a light-hearted reference, while The Guardian did not mention this detail. ABC included a joke about the South Australia election blog, which was not present in The Guardian's coverage. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Nicola Olyslagers wins silver in women's high jump at 2024 World Indoor Championships. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Nicola Olyslagers finished in a three-way silver medal share in the women's high jump at the 2024 World Indoor Championships in Torun, Poland. Yaroslava Mahuchik won gold with a clearance of 2.01 meters, defeating Olyslagers and two other athletes. Olyslagers, Yulia Levchenko, Ukraine, and Angelina Topic, Serbia, all cleared 1.99 meters and shared silver. Olyslagers cleared 1.99 meters on her first attempt, equaling her indoor personal best. Eleanor Patterson, Australia, finished 7th with a clearance of 1.93 meters. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian reports Hayley Kitching's semi-final qualifying time as 2 minutes and 0.99 seconds, while ABC reports 2 minutes and 0.09 seconds. The Guardian states Eleanor Patterson struggled to get over 1.93 m and ended up 7th, while ABC does not specify her struggles beyond finishing 7th. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia approves massive coal seam gas expansion in Queensland until 2081. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The federal government approved up to 1,695 new gas wells in Queensland's Surrott and Bowen basins until 2081. The project involves 1,545 kilometres of pipelines and 3 processing facilities across the Surrott and Bowen basins. Australia Pacific LNG, APLNG, a joint venture between ConocoPhillips, US, Origin Energy, Australia, and Sinopec, China, received the approval. The project is expected to operate until 2061, with an extended approval period to 2081 to ensure environmental conditions are met. The approval includes 120+ environmental conditions covering threatened species, vegetation clearing, water resources, and chemical risk assessments. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports 120 environmental conditions, while The Guardian states 126 conditions. ABC does not mention annual emissions reductions or a 2050 net zero requirement under the safeguard mechanism, which The Guardian highlights. ABC emphasizes job creation and economic benefits without mentioning climate impacts, while The Guardian frames the project as contradictory to climate goals and worsening pollution. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Federal government urges Fair Work Commission for above-inflation minimum wage hike amid cost of living pressures. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Fair Work Commission is reviewing the minimum wage for 2025, with a decision expected to take effect from July 1, 2025. 2.7 million Australian workers earn the national minimum wage or award wages tied to it, accounting for about 1 in 5 workers. The current minimum wage is $23.23 per hour or $948 per week for a full-time worker, as of 2024. Inflation in February 2025 was 3.7%, headline, or 3.3%, underlying, according to the Reserve Bank of Australia's preferred measure. The Albanese government has submitted to the Fair Work Commission asking for an economically sustainable real wage increase above inflation. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC reports the Fair Work Commission's 2025 determination was based on RBA confidence that inflation would fall under 3%, but the Commission's actual decision was not detailed in Newscomer. ABC states the government has not specified a number for the wage increase, while Newscomau implies the government's submission is more explicit about aligning with inflation trends. ABC highlights that Treasury's inflation projections of up to 5% may be conservative, but Newscomau does not mention this specific warning. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Testing and reviewing the best chef's knives for home cooks and professional chefs. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Ben Lippitt tested 14 knives over a fortnight for The Guardian's knife review. The Wusthof Classic Chef Knife, 20 cm, was named the best chef's knife overall by Ben Lippitt. The Victorinox Fibrox Chef's Knife, 20 cm, was selected as the best budget knife, priced at £43. Ben Lippitt recommended avoiding dishwashers for knives, stating they blunt the blade and weaken handles. Helen Simmons advised against cutting stones, bones, or frozen food with a chef's knife to prevent damage. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 lists the Sabatier Cook's Knife, 25 cm, as the best workhorse Western-style knife, but Article 2 does not mention this specific model in its summary. Article 1 provides detailed blade lengths for each recommended knife, e.g., 20 cm, 14 cm, 16 cm, while Article 2 does not repeat these specifics in its summary. Article 1 includes a section on the importance of blade geometry, Western versus Japanese styles, and chopping techniques, but Article 2 does not elaborate on this distinction. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Boating incident off Tasmania's northwest coast kills 1, rescues 3 after 16-hour ordeal. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. 4 people, 3 adults, ages 27, 33, and a 6-year-old child left the Montague boat ramp west of Smithton at 5:30 p.m. on Saturday for a fishing trip. The boat capsized around 9 p.m. Saturday, throwing all 4 into the water off Tasmania's far northwest coast near Robbins Island. 3 survivors, 27-year-old woman, 33-year-old man, and 6-year-old child, were rescued about 1 p.m. Sunday near Big Stony Island, 16 hours after the incident. The 3 rescued were wearing life jackets and suffered no injuries. They were taken to Northwest Regional Hospital for observation. The missing 35-year-old man's body was found on Monday on the eastern side of Robbins Island. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC says the boat capsized while ABC and Newscomau describe it as broke up or capsized and broke up, no single consistent term. ABC states the 35-year-old was understood to have not been wearing a life jacket at the time of search, but ABC's Inspector Maingay later clarifies he had a life jacket on at one point before removing it. Newscomau reports the 3 rescued were floating in the ocean before being found, while ABC describes them as washed ashore near Robbins Island before rescue. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Research reveals how proximity to trees affects property value and public attitudes toward urban trees. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Associate Professor Song Shi led a study, 2021 to 2025, at the University of Technology Sydney showing trees 10 to 20 metres from a house increase property value by $30,000, while trees within 10 metres reduce value by up to $70,000, accounting for bedrooms, land size, parking, and CBD proximity. Landscape architect Matt Cantwell, Secret Gardens, notes homeowners often oppose trees on private property despite valuing street trees for aesthetic appeal, e.g., Ocean Street, Woollahra, Paddington Street, Paddington. Danielle Hughes, Greater Sydney Landcare, reports residents frequently cite gum trees dropping branches as a primary concern, despite mature trees cooling areas by nearly 10 degrees and reducing cooling costs by 20 to 30%. Dr. Nada Nadapaju, University of Sydney, and PhD candidate Amir Pakiz found Western Sydney suburbs like St Mary's and Blacktown increased tree coverage, while Liverpool saw declines, possibly linked to construction, e.g., new airport expansion. National President of the Australian Institute of Architects Adam Haddow attributes reluctance to private trees to maintenance perceptions, including dropped leaves, flowers and pool lawn obstruction. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the two sources. This story was covered by Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australian Muslims celebrate Eid and Nowruz amid Middle East war and rising Islamophobia. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Eid al-Fitr and Nowruz celebrations are taking place in Australia this weekend, 2024 dates implied by context. Heidelberg Mosque in Melbourne expected 1,500 worshippers for Eid prayers on Friday morning. Lokemba Mosque in Sydney expects 50,000 attendees for Eid prayers, SBS, 50,000, Guardian, 50,000. Security at mosques has been increased due to concerns over Islamophobic incidents and war-related fears. The 7th anniversary of the Christchurch massacre is being remembered during Eid celebrations. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian mentions Lokemba Mosque requiring security not seen since the 2005 Cronulla riots, while SBS does not reference this comparison. The Guardian provides specific quotes from Inaz Janif, Imam El-Zokm, and Gamal Kir about emotional and political context, which SBS omits. The Guardian details Nowruz's role in cultural resistance and ties to recent Iranian protest shootings, while SBS does not address this aspect. This story was covered by The Guardian and SBS News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Arrest of Declan Donnelly in Sydney grandfather's mistaken identity kidnapping and murder case. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Declan James Donnelly, 23, was arrested on Wednesday morning at his Seven Hills public housing address and charged with the kidnapping and murder of Chris Bagsarian, a 85-year-old grandfather mistakenly abducted from his North Ryde home on February 13. Donnelly was captured on CCTV at Bagsarian's North Ryde home at the time of the kidnapping and later near an abandoned Dural home where Bagsarian was allegedly tortured and killed. Donnelly was arrested wearing only his underwear and his Facebook profile picture was updated on February 16, 2 days after police believe Bagsarian's body was dumped near Pitt Town Golf Course. Gerard Andrews, 29, and Daniel Stevens, 24, were previously charged with Bagsarian's kidnapping and murder and remain in custody. Police seized and sawn off shotgun, ammunition, and prohibited drugs, including heroin, methamphetamine, cocaine, and cannabis, at Donnelly's Seven Hills home. But not all outlets told the same story. SMH states Donnelly updated his Facebook profile picture on February 16 while police were hunting the killers, but Newscomau does not mention this detail. Newscomau specifies Donnelly allegedly murdered Bagsarian between February 13 morning and 9 p.m. on February 14, while SMH only states Bagsarian was believed to have been killed shortly after captors realized the wrong man was taken. SMH mentions police are investigating whether the botched abduction was ordered offshore, but Newscomau and ABC do not reference this detail. This story was covered by ABC News, news.com.au, and Sydney Morning Herald. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australian government cracks down on petrol price gouging amid Middle East war concerns. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Treasury Laws Amendment, doubling penalties for ACCC enforcement, Bill 2026 doubled maximum penalties for petrol price misconduct from $50 million to $100 million. The ACCC received over 500 reports of possible price gouging at petrol stations since the outbreak of the Middle East conflict. The ACCC is formally investigating Ampol, BP Australia, Mobil Oil Australia, and Viva Energy Australia for alleged price fixing and misconduct. The new laws outlaw false representations about price increases, price fixing, cartel behavior, and supplier refusal to sell to independent retailers. ACCC Chair Gina Cass-Gottlieb confirmed the enforcement investigation due to the significance of the issue and widespread consumer concerns. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 states the bill passed the upper house after Green's amendments were voted down, while Article 2 implies the Senate passage is uncertain and requires further support. Article 1 does not mention the bill's Senate passage status, while Article 2 explicitly notes it needs coalition or Greens support to pass the Senate. Article 1 does not quote Chalmers' direct warning to retailers, while Article 2 includes his explicit statement, "You are on notice. Do not use this conflict to take advantage of Australians." This story was covered by news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Federal judge blocks Pentagon's press access restrictions under Trump administration's policy. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. A federal judge, Paul Friedman, blocked key portions of the Pentagon's press access policy introduced in October 2025, ruling it unconstitutional under the First Amendment. The policy prohibited journalists from soliciting unauthorized information from military personnel and revoked credentials of outlets refusing to sign the new policy. Of 56 news outlets in the Pentagon Press Association, only one, unnamed, agreed to sign the new policy, leading to the loss of passes for the rest. The Pentagon assembled a new press corps consisting of pro-Trump outlets and media personalities after major outlets left. The New York Times filed a lawsuit in Washington, D.C. federal court against the Pentagon policy, alleging it violated free speech protections. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian states the policy was introduced in October 2025, while ABC does not specify the exact month but confirms it was last year, implying 2024 or 2025. The Guardian describes the policy as giving the Pentagon unfettered discretion to revoke passes, while ABC states the government argued decisions were governed by neutral, objective criteria, though Judge Friedman rejected this. The Guardian highlights Judge Friedman's explicit mention of incursion into Venezuela and war with Iran in his ruling, but ABC does not reference these specific geopolitical contexts. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia's fuel crisis driven by Middle East conflict and supply chain disruptions. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Anthony Albanese is convening a second emergency national cabinet meeting on Monday to address the fuel crisis, with the first meeting held last week, ABC, Thij, Newscomau, ABC. As of mid-April, approximately 470 to 520 service stations across Australia are without at least one type of fuel, with diesel shortages being more widespread than petrol, ABC, Newscomau, ABC. The Strait of Hormuz, a key shipping route supplying about 20 to 25% of the world's oil, has been disrupted due to the war in Iran, contributing to global fuel shortages, Thij, Newscomau, ABC. The federal government has secured additional fuel shipments, replacing 6 cancelled tankers and securing 3 more, equating to about 6 days' worth of national diesel consumption and 5 days' worth of petrol, Thij, ABC. Energy Minister Chris Bowen confirmed the government has released 6 days' worth of petrol and 5 days' worth of diesel from its emergency stockpile, ABC, Newscomau. But not all outlets told the same story. Thij reports Japan may be open to swapping petrol for gas but played down the prospect, while ABC does not mention this possibility and focuses on LNG export concerns. ABC states Employment Minister Amanda Rishworth said work-from-home measures are not being considered yet, but Thij implies voluntary measures like WFH are being discussed as contingency plans. Newscomau claims 500 stations are without fuel, while ABC reports 520 stations, with variations in diesel-petrol breakdowns across sources. This story was covered by ABC News, news.com.au, and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia's economic risks from US-Iran conflict and domestic policy fallout. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Barry Cassidy and Tony Barry discussed the fuel crisis in Australia linked to potential economic fallout from a US-Iran war. The Reserve Bank of Australia, RBA, has raised the cash rate. Treasurer Jim Chalmers is described as opening the door for a recession. Liberal MP Andrew Hastie criticizes US President Trump's approach to Iran. The Albanese government faces public blame for economic fallout from Trump's policies. But not all outlets told the same story. Article 1 says Andrew Hastie criticizes the US president, while Article 2 adds and distancing from Trump. No contradictions in factual claims beyond phrasing differences, all core details align. This story was covered by The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Coronial inquest into Bradley Murdoch's death and his refusal to disclose Peter Falconio's remains. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Bradley Murdoch was sentenced to life imprisonment in 2005 for the murder of Peter Falconio and attempted kidnapping of Joanne Lees, with a non-parole period of 28 years. Murdoch died from stage 4 cancer, throat cancer, in Alice Springs Hospital's palliative care unit on July 16, 2025, after 22 years in prison. Police made 2 attempts to convince Murdoch to reveal Falconio's remains in the weeks before his death, one visit to the prison on June 25, 2025, and another brief visit to his palliative care bed. Murdoch refused to watch a video of Falconio's parents shown by police during the June 25 visit and yelled at police to get out during the July visit. A $500,000 reward remains for information leading to Falconio's remains, which have never been found. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states Murdoch's cancer was diagnosed in November 2024 after a neck lump complaint, while The Guardian does not specify the exact diagnosis timeline. ABC highlights occasional delays in medical treatment were acknowledged but no missed opportunity for earlier diagnosis, while The Guardian focuses on Murdoch's verbal abuse of staff and refusal of radiotherapy. The Guardian describes Murdoch's final interaction with police as yelling "get out" at his bedside, while ABC does not mention this specific phrase but notes a 30-second visit. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Stephen Colbert to co-write a new Lord of the Rings film after leaving The Late Show. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Stephen Colbert will co-write a new Lord of the Rings film titled Shadow of the Past. The film will be developed alongside Philippe Arboyens and Peter Miggy, Colbert's son. Peter Jackson is involved in producing the film and announced the project via social media. The film is the second of 2 upcoming Lord of the Rings movies in development at Warner Bros. Discovery New Line Cinema. The first film, The Lord of the Rings, The Hunt for Gollum, is set for release on December 17, 2027. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC does not mention the film's plot details about Sam's daughter Eleanor or the 14-year time jump, while The Guardian provides these specifics. ABC refers to Colbert's son as Peter Colbert, but The Guardian correctly names him Peter McGee. ABC states CBS announced The Late Show cancellation in July 2023, while The Guardian does not specify the exact month but implies it was earlier. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. US-led conflict escalation in Middle East and global response over Strait of Hormuz blockage. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. European leaders, UK, France, Germany, Italy, Netherlands, and Japan issued a joint statement condemning Iran for attacks on commercial shipping vessels and civilian energy facilities, including the Strait of Hormuz closure. The joint statement called for an immediate comprehensive moratorium on attacks on civilian infrastructure, including oil and gas installations. Japan's Prime Minister Sonai Takeichi met US President Donald Trump at the White House, marking the first visit by a major US ally since Trump demanded Allied assistance for the Strait of Hormuz. Iran retaliated against an Israeli strike on its South Pars natural gas field by attacking a Qatari LNG facility, Ras Laffan, causing 17% of Qatar's LNG export capacity to be eliminated, valued at $20 billion, 28 billion Australian dollars. Brent crude oil prices briefly rose above $119 per barrel on Thursday due to escalating tensions. But not all outlets told the same story. No contradictions found between the two sources for this story. This story was covered by Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australian public anxiety over national security threats and perceived government unpreparedness. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Australian National University's National Security College surveyed over 20,000 Australians between November 2024 and February 2026, with additional qualitative data from 480 interviews, 300 meetings, 8 focus groups, and 100 public submissions. 68 to 72% of Australians surveyed in 2025 to 2026 believe Australia will be involved in a foreign military conflict within 5 years, ABC, Newscomau, Guardian. 45% of Australians expect a foreign military attack on Australian soil within 5 years, ABC, Newscomau, Guardian. 72% of Australians rated domestic terrorism a serious concern in February 2026, up from 55% in November 2024, ABC, Newscomau, Guardian. 85 to 89% of respondents believe climate change impacts, AI-enabled attacks, disinformation, foreign interference, economic crises, and supply disruptions are more likely than not to affect Australia in the next 5 years, Newscomau, Guardian. But not all outlets told the same story. ABC states nearly 70% of Australians expect military conflict involvement within 5 years, while Newscomau specifies 68% in July 2025, ABC's phrasing is slightly higher. Newscomau and Guardian both cite 45% expecting a foreign military attack on Australian soil, but ABC does not specify the exact percentage for this exact phrasing. Only 45% expect a foreign military attack on Australian soil without onshore qualifier. Guardian notes that an onshore foreign military attack was rated the greatest concern, with 43% calling it major consequences and 36% catastrophic, while ABC and Newscomau do not provide these specific impact ratings. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, and SBS News. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Democratic victory in Florida State House special election near Trump's Mar-a-Lago. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Emily Gregory, Democrat, defeated John Maples, Republican, in Florida's 87th State House District special election, with Gregory leading by 2.4 percentage points, 797 votes. The seat was previously held by Republican Mike Caruso, who won by 19 percentage points in the 2024 general election before resigning to become Palm Beach County Clerk. Donald Trump endorsed Republican candidate John Maples in the race and voted by mail despite publicly criticizing mail-in voting as fraudulent. Donald Trump switched his personal residence and voter registration to Florida during his first term and currently resides at Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach County. The district includes Mar-a-Lago, Trump's Florida estate, and the win marks the 29th Republican-held seat. Democrats have flipped since Trump's return to office. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian reports Trump voted via mail-in ballot despite criticizing the practice as mail-in cheating during an event in Tennessee this week, while ABC notes Trump's criticism was directed at universal mail-in voting and not individual accommodations. The Guardian states Gregory led by more than 2 percentage points without specifying the exact margin, while ABC specifies she led by 2.4 percentage points, 797 votes. The Guardian mentions Gregory's win as part of a broader STEM wave narrative, while ABC does not reference this term or the 314 action endorsement. This story was covered by ABC News and The Guardian. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Dietary factors and genetic influences on dementia and brain health prevention. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The MIND diet, Mediterranean diet intervention for neurodegenerative delay, is associated with a 19% reduced odds of developing mild cognitive impairment or dementia, according to a 2019 study by Scientia professor Karin Arnsti, UNSW Aging Futures Institute. A 2024 Lancet Commission report identified 14 modifiable risk factors that could prevent or delay 45% of dementia cases, including high LDL cholesterol, 7% influence, and untreated vision loss, 2%. The MIND diet is linked to preserving up to 20% more grey matter over 12 years, corresponding to a 2.5-year delay in brain aging, according to brain scan studies mentioned in SMH and THEAGE. The APOE4 gene variant, present in about 1 in 4 people, increases dementia risk and was studied in relation to dietary meat intake in a 2024 paper, SMH and THEAGE. The MIND diet emphasizes leafy greens, nuts, berries, olive oil, poultry, fish, and limits red meat, butter, cheese, fried foods, and sweets, ABC and SMH. But not all outlets told the same story. SMH and ABC both report the MIND diet's benefits, but ABC notes that whole grains showed a weak association with brain health in the Framingham study, while SMH does not mention this contradiction. SMH and ABC agree the MIND diet is beneficial overall, but ABC highlights that observational studies cannot prove cause and effect, while SMH frames the evidence as so good that some experts think diet should be recast as an official driving factor behind dementia risk, a stronger claim. SMH and ABC both cite the Framingham study's findings on grey matter preservation, but SMH emphasizes the 2.5-year delay in brain aging while ABC focuses on the observational study's limitations in proving causation. This story was covered by ABC News, Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia and EU sign long-awaited free trade and security partnership after 8 years of negotiations. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. The Australia-EU Free Trade Agreement was signed on Tuesday after 8 years of negotiations, with leaders Anthony Albanese and Ursula von der Leyen finalising terms at Parliament House in Canberra. The deal is expected to create an annual economic benefit of $10 billion for Australia, lowering trade barriers between Australia and a market of 450 million EU consumers. The agreement includes a 30,000-tonne annual tariff-free quota for Australian beef exports to the EU, a 500% increase from current levels. The EU dropped demands for Australia to scrap its luxury car tax entirely, instead reaching a compromise on the tax. The Australia-EU Security and Defence Partnership was also finalised, focusing on defence industry cooperation, cybersecurity, and counter-terrorism. But not all outlets told the same story. The ABC states the EU's beef quota is well short of the 50,000 tonnes demanded by the NFF, while Newscomau describes it as at best, a few 10,000 tonnes more than current levels, with no explicit mention of 50,000 tonnes. The ABC reports the EU's beef quota is 30,000 tonnes annually, but Newscomau does not explicitly state this number, only that it is less than the 40,000 to 50,000 tonnes industry is demanding. The ABC mentions the EU's beef quota was influenced by political concerns from EU member nations due to the EU-Mercosur deal, a detail not included in Newscomau. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Australia faces potential fuel supply disruptions due to Middle East conflict and regional export restrictions. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Australia imports around 90% of its fuel, with Malaysia as its third largest supplier of refined fuels, Newscom Australia, and top source of crude oil, Guardian. Malaysia's government stated it would prioritise domestic fuel needs before considering exports to Australia, per a Malaysian embassy spokesman quoted in both the Australian Financial Review, via Guardian, and Newscom Australia. South Korea has capped petrol and diesel exports to safeguard its own supply, Newscom Australia, and China directed refineries to pause or scale back exports, Newscom Australia. Energy Minister Chris Bowen acknowledged some petrol stations in Australia are running low on fuel, with NSW reporting 107 stations without diesel and 42 without fuel at all, Guardian. Bowen stated that governments have powers to ration petrol if supplies are severely disrupted, though he ruled out immediate rationing, Guardian. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian states Malaysia is Australia's top source of crude oil, but Newscom Australia says Malaysia is only Australia's third largest supplier of refined fuels. The Guardian reports Malaysia produces and refines significantly more fuel than domestic needs, while Newscom Australia does not provide this specific claim. The Guardian highlights that Australia's 2 domestic refineries rely on Malaysian crude oil, but Newscom Australia does not mention this dependency. This story was covered by The Guardian and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Prime Minister Albanese and Minister Burke heckled at Lokemba Mosque Eid event. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Anthony Albanese and Tony Burke attended Eid prayers at Lokemba Mosque in Sydney's West on Friday morning, 2024. Protesters at the mosque shouted phrases including genocide supporters, disgrace, and shame at Albanese and Burke. A 33-year-old man was removed from the mosque by police after being identified as a heckler and given a move-on direction. Gamal Kir, secretary of the Lebanese Muslim Association, delivered a statement defending the invitation of Albanese and Burke. Lebanese Health Ministry reports at least 912 deaths, including 111 children, and 2,221 wounded in Israel's strikes on Lebanon. But not all outlets told the same story. The Guardian reports Albanese made a hasty exit avoiding a crowd on the mosque steps, while the ABC states he and Burke remained until the end of the speech before being led out. The SMH claims initial plans included Albanese giving a speech, but The Guardian and ABC do not mention this. The ABC reports a heckler claimed Albanese was responsible for 1 billion deaths, while this exact figure is not mentioned in other sources. This story was covered by ABC News, The Guardian, news.com.au, and Sydney Morning Herald. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis. Media Fact Checker. Childcare worker convicted of indecent treatment of child, acquitted of rape in Queensland. All source articles are linked in the description below. Here's what every outlet agrees on. Avinder J. Singh, 43, was charged with digitally raping a child at a Queensland childcare centre in 2022. Singh pleaded not guilty to the rape charge and guilty of indecent treatment of a child under his care was the lesser charge he faced. The jury found Singh not guilty of rape but guilty of 1 count of indecent treatment of a child under his care. Singh was sentenced to 20 months in jail, with half, 10 months, suspended before deportation to Fiji. Singh worked at a childcare centre on a visa that was cancelled after the 2022 charges, making him an unlawful citizen. But not all outlets told the same story. News Kamau reports the victim's father said the family was absolutely devastated by the result, while ABC does not quote this exact phrase from the father. News Kamau states the child's mother said the family was incredible and the child was the bravest little girl, which is not mentioned in ABC articles. News Kamau implies the childcare centre was on the Sunshine Coast, but ABC explicitly states the location as Sunshine Coast in the trial details. This story was covered by ABC News and news.com.au. Subscribe to Media Fact Checker for daily Australian news analysis.